Okay, we are going to get started because we want to be cognizant of everybody's time here. So this is, and I want to give everybody a full heads up, just to be honest, this is Simplex-IT's first time, and Wes and Reid, I probably should have warned you about this. This is our first time of doing a live webinar through third-party tool. We're actually using StreamYard in this particular case, and we're broadcasting this live on both the YouTube channel as well as LinkedIn. So I wanted to do this on AOL instant messaging for some reason. I don't know why I was outvoted. I don't quite understand. So anyway, but I want to welcome everybody and especially our guests here, Wes and Reid from FifthWall. And what we're going to talk about is we are going to be talking about cyber insurance. Simplex-IT being a managed service provider, obviously we are very, very deeply involved with helping organizations have the most appropriate security, but we have to focus to a certain degree on the protection, on the prevention of bad things happening, but we can't do that 100%. Nobody can. And that's why you get into the how do you minimize the effect and the damage. And cyber insurance has become the big issue. And unfortunately, like everything else that's introduced new, there's often a lot of misconceptions, and some are absolutely honest misconceptions people don't quite understand, or they're sometimes dishonest misconceptions. And that's some of the stuff that we're going to talk about to make sure we get the right coverage and how to even reduce the premiums that we have. So, and I'm going to let you guys basically introduce yourselves, Wes and Reid, and I'm not even going to tell you which order to do it in.
Well, I guess I'll just go first since my image is first. So, hey everyone, you've got Wes Spencer here. I'm the Vice President and Channel Chief at FifthWall. We're helping solve cyber insurance challenges for MSPs and for clients, which is awesome. I actually come out of the cybersecurity space. I'm a cybersecurity nerd and practitioner by trade. Co-founded a cybersecurity company called Perch in 2016. Before that was in banking and cyber threat intelligence and all this cool stuff. But man, I tell you what, Bob, I love small business. And I think small business is they just need help when it comes to cybersecurity, and they don't have the resources that a bank has, right? And so I'm really passionate about working alongside our partners like you guys at Simple IT and just really helping solve these challenges, Bob. So thanks for having me today.
Cool.
Hi, everyone. My name is Reid Wellock. I'm the president of FifthWall. I am the resident cyber insurance nerd, which is a good thing for us, probably not the most attractive thing for others, but I have spent the past 7 years of my life dedicated to cyber liability. So for those of you that aren't familiar, FifthWall, we only do cyber liability insurance. It's all we do. So everyone here, that's our core focus. We brought folks on like Wes, who are experts in the space around security. And we're doing what we do best here, which is just try to really get good education out there. Make sure folks really understand this better, because that's been our biggest challenge, is making sure that we're rising that level of awareness, and looking forward to doing that today with you, Bob.
Cool. And Wes, I'm going to correct you on one thing. It is Simplex-IT, not Simple IT, which the hilarious thing is, I actually have a video on this at our learning center, is all of the mispronunciations. So we've had Simplex-IT. My favorite, though, is Simple Exit. That was my favorite mispronunciation of the company. So
I can see that. Yes.
Yeah.
My dyslexia gets me sometimes. Thank you for the correction.
No problem. And the other thing I want to comment on is your comment about the small business aspect and the managed service provider world, the MSP, where we provide where either we do it entirely, we provide all of the IT resources, or we do a co-managed world. That was really facing sort of the same dilemma, where the small, medium businesses didn't have access to all of the resources to bring really effective IT on board. And there wasn't a great model for that. And I think the same thing was happening to a certain degree now on the cyber insurance side, where only large organizations had the internal resources to actually take a look at cyber insurance from a realistic and appropriate point of view. And that's where guys like you come in. So cool. I love it.
Yeah.
So what we want to do is now we have to have the obligatory couple of slides to point out how serious this situation is. And as I've said several times, we talk about the phishing, the ransomware, the security controls. Really, the bottom line to me has always been the bad guys are making a ton of money and there's no reason they should stop. Yeah. The bad guys are entrepreneurs. They are finding ways, whether it be through just getting money from you, i.e. ransomware, where it be intellectual property theft, where it be whatever method, the creativity that the entrepreneurial mindset brings. These bad guys are doing it, and they've got the money and the funds and the really, really creative people to do this. And in a lot of cases, they're working in parts of the world that want this to happen. So the business model is great from their perspective, and the business model is so that they can really afford to pay really, really good wages. I mean, I hate to say that, and encourage people to take up jobs and to come up with more and more creative ways to basically hack us and take our money.
I mean, you said it 100% right, Bob. That's exactly it. On my YouTube channel, I have a documentary I created called The Rise and Fall of Reid, and I sort of document and go into who these threat actors were. They're out of Russia. And just recently, through some political maneuvering that happened between the U.S. and Russia, this is right before the beginning of the war, they were taken down. And I have some behind-the-scenes footage where you actually see these guys being cuffed and probably sent off to some Russian gulag. But it's incredible, Bob. You just see like just huge containers full of cash, of U.S. dollars, U.S. currency. And these guys are absolutely, like, I've got some videos of them like tearing up in their local town in their Lambos, all purchased from money stolen from small and mid-sized businesses. These Reid threat actors made their money in their heyday was going after businesses that are like that small and mid-size. And you're right. Like, 5 years ago, I think it was fair to say, like, I'm not a target. No one's coming after me. Today, that world has totally changed. It's just all the stats you see here prove it. But I see this stuff happen all the time, and mid-size and small business are the center of attention. I mean, if I'm a bad guy and like a physical robber, am I going to go after Bank of America's headquarters in like New York or wherever it is? Or am I going to go after a small little bank, in Main Street in small town USA? I'm going after where the money's easier. And so you nailed it. This is absolutely a priority for every business, large and small.
Yeah, and the one thing I'll add to that as well is we're not a huge client to Amazon, to Facebook, to Google, and yet they have invested a ton of money to get money from us. And so the same thing, if you're sitting there going, well, my organization is safe because we're so small, they can still come after you. They can still make enough money that they make it up in volume.
Yeah.
So, cool. Actually, Wes, do me a favor. Send me the link to that video. We'll include it because we'll do a follow-up to tell everybody how to get to this
you got
recording.
it.
Love to see that. So terrific. And then you can see from the industry standpoint, wow, look, they're going after the money. Who'd have thunk? But seriously, you could see that the demand is there. But even if you take a look at the breakdown as far as the industries go, to some degree, some of that actually represents the size of those industries.
Yeah.
So just because you look down and go, oh, okay, professional legal services, well, we weren't hit that hard. Well, the financial industry is a bigger industry than you.
Yep.
So it would make sense that the dollars. So everybody's on this slide to a certain degree.
Not only that, Bob, we see on the claim side with, I'm going to pick on manufacturing, right? Because they're right there in the middle of the pack. But I know on our side of the fence, when in 2018, if you were a manufacturer, you could get cyber coverage really easily. You weren't really viewed as a high risk.
Right.
But then following that same line of logic, tons of manufacturers started getting hit, right? That became a very focused industry as a target. And if you try to get a policy today as a manufacturer, it's difficult because you are a much, much higher risk. So to your point, this kind of tells a story, but there's another one beneath the surface. And we look at frequency of attacks and it's all over the place, but it certainly started, each one started to rise coming from a place where they thought they weren't a target.
Yeah, and a couple of things I want to add to this too. I mean, there's some meaning behind the scenes here that you don't quite see come out when you look at this. Like, one thing I want to pull out is Okay, let's say you're professional legal services and you're watching this today, CPA firm, something like that. And you're like, oh, well, we're the lowest. We're good. How would you like to pay $630,000 just for a ransomware payment? Like, that's still a staggering amount, right? Yeah. The second thing, though, is a lot of times these bad guys, not a lot, almost always, part of their SOP, their standard operating procedure, is jumping in and understanding exactly how much money that you make. They actually get access to your books. So they see and they understand, okay, you're making this much money as a company, you can afford this amount of a ransomware payment, because it's worth it for them to do that kind of work, right? And so sometimes the reason you see these numbers that are smaller as you go down is just because those victims are actually smaller business, right? Mm-hmm. In my experience, a ransomware payment usually is about $1 million. I've dealt with a lot of these in my career. Even if you pull it down through good negotiations down to, let's say, 500,000, which is close to where that 2020 demand is, even if you're able to pull it down, we'll talk about this in a minute, but there's so many other ancillary costs that a lot of small business haven't thought about. Like lost business is one of the most important ones that's very hard to get a grip on.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And it gets back to the whole question about the entrepreneurial standpoint. When you're selling a product, one of the questions you ask is, how much does the client need and how much can the client afford?
Yeah.
To put those questions in the perspective of a ransom.
Yeah.
I'm laughing because it hasn't happened to me. Yeah. But for them to be able to analyze the books and go, oh, these guys can probably afford $5,000. And if we do the $5,000, they're going to pay it right out of the bat because they can't afford the damage. Yep. Somebody else, $20,000, somebody else, whatever.
Path of least resistance, right?
Yeah,
they want to move, and they want to move quickly, and they want to get their money and move on to the next target.
Cool. You almost hate to have you have to have a certain amount of hatred but respect.
Yeah.
Of the bad actors in this game. So anyway, and the 3 trends. And actually, I'm going to let you guys touch on these.
For sure. I'll jump in on a couple of them, and I'm actually going to add a 4th one that's starting to emerge, if I might. So we know supply chain. Yeah, it's like, great. Another one's what we need. So supply chain attacks, these are really, really, really disastrous, and they're usually very focused and very sophisticated. So bad guys have learned there is a supply chain of industry that exists that I can attack. Right. So we saw this a couple years ago. There was a company that was hit called SolarWinds, and SolarWinds had a tool that all of these industries used. And so what they were able to do is really nefarious. They got access to SolarWinds. They were able to use SolarWinds software deployment and put their own malware into it, their own nasty stuff, and then it gets installed everywhere. I'm keeping this non-technical as I can. Think about how scary that is. And then within the presence of an instant, all of a sudden you have all these companies that are now breached because their supplier was breached. And this is a colossally difficult, colossally challenging aspect to have to deal with. Because you oftentimes, Bob, don't do anything wrong. It's just you doing what you do, and something in your supply chain that delivers stuff to you causes the breach. And that's something a lot of small business never think about. So that's the first one. Reid, you want to talk about which one you want to talk about? I want you to pick. I don't want to hop.
I'll take the third one. I'll take the third one. Why don't you keep going?
I'll do RAS. So ransomware is a service, right? So now we've seen this since 2017, but really begin to pick up through these threat actors that now sort of formalize. It's organized crime is what it is. Most of it's out of Russia, Ukraine, Vietnam, Syria. A lot of these is, Bob, you mentioned these non-extradition countries. And so, and as you also mentioned, their countries just look the other way as long as they're not going after their own people. Right. They're happy to go after the West. And so what you have is these operators, and these operators are the ones that create the software, that maintain the software. They're almost like a software company. And then they go to these affiliates and say, you can use our software and we will give you a significant cut of every business that you breach. And so this has created a supply chain for themselves, a cybercrime supply chain, where they're now going out to all of their affiliates, and they can and if you wonder, like, why did ransomware just blow up out of nowhere? This was a major change that they made, where they said, we're going to make life easy. If you want to be an affiliate and you want to be a nasty bad guy, go for it. We'll push the easy button for you.
So this is like if an organization wants email and they don't have email server or whatever, they go to Google or they go to Microsoft and they just get Microsoft 365 or they get Google Docs or the like. Instead, this is somebody waking up and saying, I want to be a crook and I want to be a ransomware guy, but I don't want to have to learn how to do it. This would be ransomware as a service. They do that.
You nailed it.
Same model.
You nailed it. Way back.
Yeah,
in
you don't have to be the smartest guy in the room anymore.
Oh,
and what blew my mind is these are often folks. I mean, it's been commoditized, right? So you can get easy access to it, and guess what? You don't have to be a sophisticated hacker. You could be a 16-year-old, right? That still lives in their parents' basement, and you can get access to this really simply, and it's way too easy. Let me take the next one, since you said you're gonna sandwich these, Wes, with a fourth one. So multi-extortion attack techniques. So we're seeing this a lot when we're going to talk about the insurance piece towards the back end. We'll save the exciting stuff for the end. But when we talk about what we're looking at as preventative measures, and we're talking about the underwriting component, that's our world. A lot of it is, based around, if you do get attacked, what's the plan, right? And part of that we see is make sure that, you have backups, right? Everything's backed up and segregated. So in the event you get help for ransom, you know what? We can let that go. We can restore from backups over here and keep backup and running. Well, hackers saw, okay, well, then fine, I'll raise you one. And if I find anything that's valuable, right? Anything that you wouldn't want someone else to see, I'm going to hold on to that. So even if you go ahead and restore the backups and you don't pay me, I can still hold this over your head. A big thing we're seeing is that even if it's nothing, we'll say incriminating, right? Or anything, you don't have any bad photos, but the simple fact that folks don't want others to know that they have been breached, that comes with a level of reputational damage that's really detrimental. And we'll cover that later. We're seeing that more and more. And, on the insurance side, that's technically a covered event if you are experiencing reputational damage. So it's just another element that the bad guys, as business goes, they're continuing to improve their business model.
So the fourth one, and I'll just be real quick on it so we can keep going through our content, is we're starting to see the emergence of a new attack vector. Instead of ransoming files, we're now there's one new threat actor that's now out on the streets, and they're actually deleting files. And so what they do is when you get breached and they have full access to your network, they do the extortion piece where they steal all of your data, they exfiltrate all of your data, and then they immediately delete it. And the reason they're doing that is they found it to actually be easier for them, where they say, if we have a clear text, unencrypted copy of all your data, it's very easy for us to get that back to you. And what they're trying to do is they're trying to push you into a ransom, but also make the recovery so easy that you're incentivized to pay. A lot of times people don't want to pay because they're like, oh, the difficulty of recovering. And that's a huge thing you have to deal with. And so now they're like, what if we can get away from encrypting and just steal your files? And literally, if we have to, just mail you a hard drive back if it took it, right? Yeah. Or whatever it means. But that's actually where they're starting to go, Bob. Isn't that crazy?
So you're basically saying that what they're doing is an improvement in customer service.
Yep.
Like entrepreneur.
Yeah. 100%.
You'd be blown away, Bob. They have legitimate customer service departments.
Yeah.
At some of these.
Which again, to me, that's the thing that's scariest. It's the fact that they have what everyone else would consider a legitimate business model, except for the crime aspect of it. And there is, at this point, no threat against their business model that is going to be meaningful from an industry standpoint. So
crazy.
Yep. So, and we talk, and again, I kind of hinted at this at the beginning. We talk about what the defense is. What can we do to minimize or to prevent this from happening? And this is where organizations such as Simplex-IT can do a great job partnering with our clients and all that kind of fun stuff, whether or not they have internal IT. And again, backup, business continuity. The last line of defense of 90% of bad news in IT is a good backup. And you guys were talking earlier about making sure that the backups are separate. One of the questions I ask people often is, if you were compromised, meaning everything that suddenly became evil, how much damage could you do to your organization? Because in a lot of cases, especially when they start getting your credentials and the like, that's what happens. So you want to make sure that your backups are segregated enough. And then endpoint protection, because a lot of these things, especially when we're talking about phishing or ransomware or the like, it happens because a specific device, an endpoint device, desktop, laptop, even phones, was compromised in some way, shape, or form. The third one Two-factor freaking authentication or multi-factor authentication. This is by far and away the most annoying the most effective strategy in terms of protecting your organization. And yet it is also one of the most annoying, but too bad. It's kind of like seatbelts. We're all wearing them for a reason, and none of us are going, oh, good, I get to put my seatbelt on. It's a great day. The same thing is going there. And then the fourth one, and this is entertaining, is user awareness training. I can't tell you how many organizations have this but don't use it, and then are wondering, how did this happen? Why did my people click on this? Well, you never told them why not to. You never told them what to do instead. There are some great solutions available, provided by us, provided by other companies, and then continuous vulnerability management, because even we have an obsolete PowerPoint presentation here today because we didn't have the last piece to it. Okay, because this thing is constantly changing. They're constantly looking for new ways. And so one of the things to ask for your organization, are you handling IT security the same way you were even a year ago, even 2 years ago? If you are obsolete. You are out of date. There is a constant change and a constant engagement that has to happen with the organization. It's not just an IT thing. It's not just a management thing. It's an organizational thing that you've constantly got to be looking for making changes and the like. And actually, if you guys want to talk about these.
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, as you sort of slide downward and look at a lot of these additional tools and processes that exist, we won't go through every single one. If anyone's curious on diving in deep, just call it out in chat. We'd be happy to talk to you more about it. But a lot of these things are just taking this to the next level, right? So like this XDR and SIM is this idea of sort of like looking at the behavior, the logs, and the activity that's happening inside your network. It's sort of like think of it as an alarm system for your home, same kind of thing. We're looking for, the hallway movement at 2 a.m. could be a sign of an intruder. It could just be, someone came in late at night, but it's the same thing for your network, right? Same with that active monitoring and detection. It's great to have the logs coming in, looking all of those things, but looking at having someone watch over it is critical, right? Who buys an alarm system that's not monitored, right? You still want to have some ability to let you know when something happens. And then incident response management, right? This isn't really a tool that you buy. This is something that you work with Simplex on and say, help us be prepared for the incident. We have tornado plans. I live in Tampa, so we have these things called evacuation plans. We have bug out bags, we have food, you have generators, you have all this stuff where you're prepared for the eventual hurricane coming. Well, you're doing the same thing for your network, right? This isn't like a thing you go buy. This is some time that you invest to say, Simplex, how do we be ready for this if something were to happen? That's what incident response is. Risk assessments, another thing that you work with Simplex on. You don't just buy a risk assessment and all of a sudden it works, right? You have to actually ask questions and answer and investigate and really dive into like what you're doing. And risk assessments are great, Bob, because they give you that like high, medium, low. They give you that work effort of like, here's what we need to be working on. Many times a risk assessment can even kind of give you a little bit of a peer analysis to kind of see how you stack up a little bit. They're really helpful to kind of understand where your gauge is on all these things. And then just being proactive. This is a cycle. Security is not something that you start and finish. Security is a zen, right? It's something that is always going. So proactive reviews, validation, making sure things are in place. That's what good security looks like.
Cool. And to double down on one of the points we're going to talk about a lot is risk. The whole concept of risk is what is the likelihood of an event that will cause damage to happen versus what is the cost if it did. And a lot of organizations kind of whistle past the graveyard when it comes to that. Oh, it'll never happen to us. Oh, we're too small, or it's too expensive to mitigate or prevent these sort of things. And in some cases, because of the nature of your organization, it may not be the highest requirement, but you need to at least evaluate that. So.
Absolutely.
Cool. And oops. And then we've got the ransomware resilience.
Yeah.
And this is just basically advice on how to minimize the likelihood, right?
Yep, it is. And there's so much to say, so we won't go through every piece of this. This is one of those things, just screenshot the slide or just reach out to Bob and team and we'll get you a copy. But at a high level, I think, Bob, what we'll say about this is this, if you see these in blue, the identify, protect, detect, respond, recover, these are very intentional things that we have here. These come from the NIST cybersecurity framework, NIST, National Institute of Standards and Technology. You know, the people that tell you what a second is and how long an inch is. They also tell us what good security looks like. And it's sort of a blueprint, right? I don't just build a house. I don't just start building it willy-nilly and hope it turns out like I might in Minecraft when I play with my kids. You have to have a blueprint to build a house. You have to have a blueprint to follow security. And that blueprint there's literally thousands of people hours that have gone into creating these blueprints, right? And so this is what is involved in making sure you're doing the right thing. And believe it or not, it's like you said, Bob, like it's not one of those things where, you're investing all this time and money, you get no return out of it, right? This really bolsters your company both to eliminate something from bad happening, or when something eventually bad does happen, because eventually it will happen to everybody. We can't stop it. It helps us reduce that blast radius and help us be able to respond quicker and reduce our costs. It doesn't have to be a $2 million damage event. It doesn't have to be, right? So there are things that we can do that can reduce that. And that's what a lot of this is about.
Absolutely. Good stuff. Okay. Now, if we're actually going to have a conversation about cyber insurance, we have to start with two disclaimers. And I'm going to start with mine first. My father was an insurance agent, and by all accounts, he was a very, very good one. He was a $1 million round table member, almost lifetime, all sorts of stuff. He was very, very good. And the one thing that he taught me about this industry is there is no way on God's green earth that I would ever be an insurance salesman. So that's my disclaimer. I think you guys have something. I don't know if it's similar or not.
This is as close as you get to it, right, Bob?
Yep. Not for the faint of heart. Real quick, folks, though, we are going to go through some covered examples, and that's what they are, right? So we want this to be an educational time. So, got to say it, but in the event of any loss or any event, you always want to look at your policy specific terms, conditions, limitations, and exclusions in the event that will govern the event of that loss. So, without further ado, I think, at least for me, this is the exciting portion of the presentation. We'll see if anyone else today finds cyber insurance to be as exciting.
You mean this slide or what comes afterwards?
Oh, what comes after, Bob?
Oh, okay. I was going to say, because this is...
We're going to get into a roller coaster here. All right. Real quick. So I'll set the stage and then we can kind of go through some of the details on insurance. But I always like to start these presentations with just kind of level setting with folks. And I think we already did a pretty good job of that earlier, where we want to showcase that this is the type of scenario that can play out for anybody, right? This has nothing to do with the size of your business. This has nothing to do with the nature of your business. If you're operating in today's standards and you're operating technology, this needs to be as real to you as fire. And as crazy as it sounds, at least for me, that's, for a lot of folks, that's still something that we're trying to better understand, right? With fire, I understand it. It's there. If I touch it, it's hot. If it touches something else, it catches on fire. I get it, but it makes sense. With cyber, that's unfortunately not so simple, right? And so that's our goal today. So I'm not going to read these examples aloud, but what we want to showcase is there's just simple events that have consistently turned into large events, right? And a lot of it isn't just about yourself, okay? A lot of it is what would happen if you, in your business, were the cause for someone else's breach. And we're seeing that all over the place. And that's when we get to third-party liability. But I'll just read the top one real quick, just to prove a point. An employee inadvertently transmitted a virus to customers and suppliers. The company was sued for failing to contain the virus. Losses totaled more than $3 million. We're seeing a lot of this. We live in a very litigious society, right? Where if there are damages, folks are going to find out, well, who was really the root cause of those damages? And if we want to look at some more scenarios to consider on the next slide here, Bob. So just real quick, imagine if a hacker gained access to the email account of a staff member with the authority to direct other staff members or communicate with client or partner. A lot of times we think about the data piece, like what's mine that someone could take. But using us and the way that we can influence others is another real great way that these newfound business owners, these cyber criminals, have found to gain access to other companies to steal money in different ways. At the end of the day, a cyber event doesn't happen just in one singular way, right? It can happen in many different ways. So, and we mentioned this earlier, your reputational damage. So something to think about when we think about that afterburn. We're seeing a lot, even just 6 months after a business gets breached, assuming they were able to navigate through and didn't close their doors, because we're seeing a lot of that, they still have the reputational damage to think about, right? What does it look like to your clients, your suppliers, those that you do business with after you've been breached and you're being viewed as less secure? And then the classic one of just, well, if you can't access your systems, a good tabletop exercise is, well, how bad could a breach be? Okay, turn off your computers, turn off everything, your phones, your computers, everything. Okay, how well are you running your business right now? It's a pretty good exercise to go through.
Yep.
Anything you want to add here, Wes?
You just want to come back to the ancillary pieces, right? It's very difficult sometimes for us to really think through what all bad could happen, right? Like it's not just, again, paying the ransom. It's all of the other things that come with a breach that we're just not prepared for. Let me give you one example. Every state now in the union has laws around disclosure. And so if you have your data breached, one of the things that you have to do is follow your own state's disclosure laws. And these are things that cost lawyers time. And boy, lawyers, they love to bill their hours, baby. Mm-hmm. And it gets even more compounded if you have clients in different states. So if you have a client in North Dakota and one in Florida, each of those are different. Now, they all follow similar patterns, but they all have different requirements, different timelines. And so these are things where all of a sudden you're like, wait, now I've got to put into billable hours at $400 an hour a bunch of law firms that are helping me like with all this data, and I'm getting letters from like, state attorneys' offices in other states. Like this, I'm not ready for this. What's happening here, right? Just one example. And I don't want to scare you. We need to have a realist's approach to why cybersecurity has become such an important business risk. And if it's that way, then we should be able to put the time into what do we do to address that risk and reduce it, right? And so just wanted to throw those things out there because these scenarios are helpful to really make you think a little bit more outside the box than you might normally.
Yep. And while we're putting the warm and fuzzy thoughts out there for everyone, also just another disclaimer, all these things we're talking about, they are actually covered under a good cyber policy. So we're not just dropping terrible stories on you and you're going, oh my gosh, what do I do? Right? There's a solution here at the end.
There is a light.
I want to make sure folks are aware of that.
Cool. Yeah. So the 2 points I want to make on this as well is on the other side of the coin. On one side, organizations in today's economy and actually for the last 10, 15 years are trying to do everything they can to be much more responsive to their clients, to their stakeholders. So they don't spend or they don't have as much time to adjust to the new threats or to know everything. So we're all trying to be great with our clients. We're all trying to be great with our vendors. And we're also getting more and more into more and more partnerships with other organizations who are providing goods and services, the supply chain we talked about. Every one of those things that we're doing opens up the doors for the bad guys to take advantage of these things. And that's not stopping either. So on the one side, the bad guys are becoming more and more involved, more and more incentivized to come up with bad ways to do things. And the more that we as organizations and business owners are coming up with potential vulnerabilities, with new technologies and new methodologies, all about doing more for our clients quicker with less.
So you just gave a good segue, Bob, for opening the door, because when we talked about the tactics, right? Yeah. On the next slide here, where it's a pretty simple exercise. If what's easier for me to try to break into your home, trying to break down the door, break through a window, climb up the drain pipe, and maybe go in through an open window that way? What if I just have somebody on the inside open the door for me? Right? That's a lot easier, and that's what we're seeing.
Absolutely, gets back to Kevin Mitnick, social engineering.
Yep. So real quick here, I'll try not to get on my my insurance soapbox here because I can get pretty excited whenever I get to tell the story of insurance. But I do think it's a really good perspective to have, because if you're, folks on the call today might be like, well, yeah, I already got insurance. And we're going to talk about what does good insurance mean. But you may have actually experienced something really difficult in your most recent iteration of renewing your coverage or getting coverage for the first time. And also, we're going to talk about what do you actually have to have in place to qualify for cyber insurance. And believe it or not, that always wasn't the case. So real quick, we go back in time, all the way back to 2015. Okay. And at this time, cyber insurance wasn't that popular, but for the insurance industry, it was, ooh, here's something new to sell, maybe. And I sit in the middle, so I can bash the insurance industry for a little bit here. But it was a land grab, to be honest. And there was a lot of policies that were sold and very little underwriting was done. I could go up to Bob and say, hey, Bob, let me get you a cyber insurance quote. And you go, great. What do you need? You need to see if I have MFA enabled. Do you need to see if I have, all these technical services and controls in place? I go, nope, Bob, all I need is your revenue. That's it. Great. Here's your cyber policy. So you wouldn't be surprised when ransomware came to the scene, whenever we started to see actual rise in claims, that insurers got in a lot of hot water. Okay. And yes, this is a for-profit business, and they were not making profit. And in fact, you saw a lot of carriers get out of cyber insurance completely because they just dug a hole too deep. So this is an industry that lives in the actuarial science. Insurance lives on all the stats from the past to tell them what they need to be doing to predict the future. Well, cyber's too new. And you saw and are still seeing a lot of volatility in the market. You're still seeing a lot of different carriers have different approaches of how they're going to evaluate risk, but they're all coming to a similar place where every carrier right now is saying, all right, nope, we can't do it the old way. We got to really understand the risks that we're writing. We got to understand what's in place. And there was this shift. But for insurance, it's been always a slow movement towards these things, where the fact that they changed, generally speaking, every carrier changed their practice within less than 18 months is kind of astronomical in the insurance world. Typically, that'd be over the course of a decade, right? But all of a sudden, it was like, nope, either sink or swim. And so you're seeing a lot of, I'll say, inconsistency in the marketplace. But one thing is true. They're looking for core things, right? And insurers don't want to be losing money anymore. So they now know the basics of what to look for, and they're still learning. And we're going to cover that later in the presentation. But if you're going to go ahead through the process and apply for cyber coverage, they want to make sure that you have the appropriate measures in place. So there's a lot more I could tell on that story, but I'll stop there because that brings us about the present day.
Okay.
All right. So Wes, I've been forcing you, maybe you've been kicking and screaming, to get more acclimated with cyber insurance and better understand what we're doing on the policy side. So tell me what we're seeing today on how do I know if I have good coverage or what type of insurance that I have?
I'm getting tested live by Professor Insurance here. We'll see if I sink or swim, right? So there's definitely a difference between, well, first of all, no coverage, right? Like a lot of times you may see a client say, well, I've got like just general business coverage, so I should be okay, right? That's not designed for a cyber event and will not pay out in a cyber event. You might also see sometimes an endorsement where something's just like tacked on to your general policy. That's also no good, right? Those are also not designed to pay out for claims. And so we see these often, and usually not only do they don't pay out, usually they have like a limit of 100K. And as we've already shown you, 100K goes nowhere. I mean, that doesn't even cover the stinking lawyers, right? So a true cyber policy is super important here. It's the only thing that's been created and designed to actually give you coverage and address your risk. And so we'll dive into like the elements of it in just a second. But usually they have a lot of like components of coverage, which we'll show what those are. Usually you're going to see for most small business around $1 million, but we'll help you, right? Reach out to us and we'll kind of help you understand based on where your revenue is at, based on your industry, exactly the amount of coverage that you need. We see anywhere often from 1 to 3 million. You can go higher and it gets more complex as you go higher. But these are the things that for your business is critical in addressing everything we've talked about as we've gone through all of this. Reid, what I missed there.
You did a great job. I'll say if, at the end, we'll open it up and FifthWall's happy to do a free service of do an evaluation of coverage, and say we get into a scenario and you ended up having one of these endorsements, and you might say, well, how the heck did I end up with one of these? Well, I just want to throw a quick, just shout out to the agents out there in the world. There's a reality. This is something really, really new. And I know well, I thought cyber insurance has been around for a couple of years. Well, yeah, it's new for insurance. And you've got a lot of agents that are really, really good agents. They know workman's comp. They know general liability. They know what they've known for the past decades, perhaps, if they've been in the game for a while. Cyber is not only new from a coverage standpoint, but it's a totally different animal when it comes to understanding the actual exposures and evaluating the risk. Now, we stand apart because literally this is all we do. You do not want me, certainly not Wes, talking about your general liability or workman's comp. All right. This is something that, if you don't have proper coverage or if you haven't had the conversation, it is critical. It's really important. And also understand that, agents are still in this learning curve right now. And we're here in the support of agents, but we're also working directly. So I just want to make sure that disclaimer's out there for someone that's going, why didn't my agent talk to me about this? Well, it's a pretty intimidating subject if you're not familiar with it.
Cool.
All right. So I'll hit part of this and then we'll go into more broader coverage, understand what it is. But actually, we've already alluded to this, and Wes, you were talking about the ancillary parts and pieces. When we talk about a breach, the exercise of going through a cyber policy and actually understanding what it's supposed to do is a really good exercise, because first, you should know what you're buying. But second of all, whenever you go through that, it actually can start to tell a story of, oh, these are the different ways that my business can be affected. These are the different ways of financial loss. This is the direct or indirect type of losses I can experience. So real quick, let's just hit a high level. When we talk about the right of boom, what Wes was going through when he was talking about the NIST framework, and we were on the right side of that page. When a breach occurs, it can go a lot of different ways. But for insurance, it stays on a pretty static path in the very beginning. So Wes, I'm going to do this to you again, if you don't mind, because I'll handle the nitty gritty. I'll handle the next one, which is the heavier lift in my mind.
Okay.
So if a breach occurs, what's next?
Yeah. So when that big thing happens, or even a suspected thing may happen, right? Like, well, this seems a little odd, right? This is where the first thing that you want to do is you want to get in touch. If you have insurance, right, is you're gonna call your carrier, right? And you're gonna say, hey, we need to put you on notice. Something weird's happening. The very first thing that they're going to do is put you in with a breach coach. We call it a breach coach. It's actually a lawyer. It's somebody that specializes in cyber law. And the reason that's so critical is, as much as it's great to have, just a general lawyer for like business purposes, for all the things you normally do, having someone that's specialized in cyber law is critical, because it's a huge compounded issue, as we've talked about, right? So what they're going to do is they establish the client attorney privilege, which is awesome and really helpful. And then they're going to start diving into being they're your quarterback, right? And what's great about that is they're not emotionally invested like you are. And that's what you need. You're not going to think clearly. I've dealt with a lot of companies that have gone through a breach in my days at Perch, my last company, and even seeing this now is, you don't think rationally and clearly. Your business is coming down. Everyone's angry at you. All your friends, all your business associates are angry. And so the breach coach comes in and they're helping you think through, how do we deal with this? What's the next steps? What's the severity? And so they're going to kick off things like forensics, where they're actually going to dive into what is happening right now in this instant. How significant is this? What is the nature of this attack? Maybe at this point, they're going to even, like, let's say it's a ransomware event, right? And all your network is hit with ransomware. Nothing's online. You can't operate anything. So they're going to start diving into, could we recover from this? What would that recovery look like? How would that recovery begin? How do we eliminate the bad guy from the network? How do we evict them out, right? They're going to kick off things like you see on the very far right. Like, how do we notify our people, right? There are things that you can and cannot say. There are things that you should and should not say at every phase of the event. And the last thing you want is, your people picking up the phones being like, yeah, we definitely been hit by ransomware. We have a breach. We're going to do what we can to fix it right now. There's so many things on what to say. The public relations piece. And you think, well, I don't need public relations. Isn't that for like the president? What do I need that for? Right. Well, again, your ability to handle that is critical to make sure that the message is consistent on what's happening. And again, what you can and cannot say to external third parties. And that reputational damage is immense. Credit monitoring, right? We know this day and age of credit monitoring. It seems like I always get a free year of credit monitoring from somebody that I use that at a breach, right? And so that's a component that you're required to do. Fraud response, right? Everything from negotiating the ransomware to actually restoring the ransomware, to recovering your systems back to good use. These are all things. There's much more, but just we want to give you a piece of like what this crisis looks like. It's not a fun time to go through, but having a breach coach that's working with you and has done this 1,000+ times before is the difference between your company surviving and you just saying, I give up. I can't do this. And I've seen that happen.
I'll say this, if I'm buying a cyber policy, hopefully I'm doing it because I want to understand the coverages and the specifics of what it's covering and how it's going to make me financially whole and all that good stuff. But there's a huge benefit here that Wes just hit on, and that is you need a Sherpa. Okay, this is a chaotic time, and if you have a good policy that's tied to a good program, this is someone that's done this thousands of times, right? They're not emotionally invested in this. They want to get you from A to B to C to D quickly because time is money for them, right? But we really want to make sure that, you know, we keep you on the path you're supposed to be on. And if without that, I mean, I don't know if anyone on the call has been through a breach before, but you're kind of relying on either your previous experience or friends, family, who knows, but you don't want to be in that situation.
We also have in chat here, we have Brad Gross, who is one of the best cyber attorneys that I know of on planet Earth. So Brad, feel free to pop into chat any other additional things you want to add into this, because Brad is awesome and glad to have you on the live stream.
Hey,
today.
Brad.
Absolutely. Brad is a lawyer for Simplex-IT. So
makes me happy to hear.
Yep.
Wonderful. All right. Fun stuff coming up. Here's my insurance fastball. All right.
Oh, this does look fun.
It's so much fun. Now, I know we want to leave time for questions, so I will not spend too much time on this. But here's the point I want to get across. Folks, there's a lot of stuff that's covered in a good policy. And we talk about, I heard, do they pay claims? Or what all do they do? Generally speaking, if you're looking at a comprehensive policy, it's created to make you whole, right? We want to make sure that it's the actual safety net for first and third party, right? So things that affected you directly, and then things that indirectly you may have caused someone else, and legally there may be implications there. You want to make sure everything that Wes just mentioned, that whole path of going through those third parties, legal, forensics, PR, providing the services, these are all things that are not only paid for and covered, these services are provided directly, right? So guess what? The attorney is going to be brought to you. The panel of forensics firms are going to be brought to you. The PR firms that are utilized, they're brought to you. This is all part of a good program. When we get into I'll say kind of some of the softer coverages here, but extortion, ransomware, I think that's pretty self-explanatory. But look, if you get ransomed and at the end of the day, that's the only option, you can actually have a policy pay for that ransom. Business interruption, this is a big one. I gave the example of what happens if we turn off all your computers, remove your phones, all that good stuff. What do? Guess what? You probably can't operate. But even if we don't go that severe, and let's just say, hey, while you're over here dealing with this mess that is a cyber incident, you're not over here able to work on your business, and you are losing revenue as a result of that, guess what? You could file a claim for that. When we get into multimedia liability, reputational damage, these are things, they're soft costs, but reputational damage is one. I already mentioned it before, but it is a big one. Folks don't often think about is what would it look like for you as a business if you were breached, and could that possibly affect you 6 to 12 months after the fact, right? If clients don't renew with you or if clients leave you. When we get into some of the other coverages, so hardware replacement, hopefully it's self-explanatory. We have hardware that when it needs replaced, is our policy will replace it. Dependent network interruption, when we're talking about this is mostly for internet service providers or cloud service providers. Some policies go outside of that, but if they experience an event that brings them down and your business is dependent upon them, right? It's just like business interruption. I can't drive revenue if this other company is down. That's a claim. When we start looking at some of the utility frauds, so if anyone's familiar with cryptojacking and utilizing your machine, your equipment, your servers to run crypto mining software. The end result of that is you're going to be burning a lot of energy. I'm not going to go into the specifics, but that is not a cost that you should bear. Invoice manipulation, when someone is using you as a vehicle in your business to send out false invoices and someone else is paying those invoices, they're out money, right? And in reality, it's because of you. So how is that working? Well, guess what? It's cyber policy. And the last piece of this is the crime. And I think this is where most folks have probably a better understanding, because this is where it's more popular. Okay. We know about, I think most folks have heard of social engineering, maybe not that term, but being tricked, right? We talked about the human element. Well, when human manipulation comes into play, it's typically for someone being tricked into paying money or giving money or transferring money, right? So when you see these sublimits on a cyber policy, you may say, well, wait a minute, is this only paying for that event? No, it's paying specifically for the funds that you just lost, but then you have the full access for everything else. So they're saying, look, we'll cut you a check for up to 250 grand if you're duped out of that much money. Electronic theft, think of it more on traditional theft. Someone goes into your system and actually steals funds. And then telecommunication theft is a lot more of utility coverage. So it's, if phone systems are utilized for robo dialing, or there's a lot of other techniques, but the end result is that your utility, your phone bill goes up. You don't want to have to bear that cost. So anyway, there's a lot of other tiny things we go into, but the story I wanted to paint real quickly, as I'm trying to talk like the Micro Machines guy from the 80s, right? Trying to talk really fast through this, is there's a big picture here. And if you take the time, don't do it in 4 minutes like I just did, but take 15, 20 minutes with someone that actually knows what they're doing to walk through these. So you can actually kind of start to think and process, okay, is this relevant to my business? What would the scenario look like? And that'll start to paint the picture of, okay, these are the different ways that my business can be impacted. And this does make sense why I would need a cyber policy. But that exercise alone, hopefully, can just be helpful for you just to better understand this issue. Cool. All right. I'm off my soapbox.
And a fine soapbox it was.
All right. I know we already hit on these. Bob, you already actually hit on these really well. These were the first 5 that were listed on that previous slide. What was that? Earlier in the presentation. But we're talking about an industry, I just said, is getting crazy shook up, and everyone's kind of doing things a little bit differently. But guess what? They're all kind of finding even ground when it comes to how do we get some good baselines? What are the table stake controls that we need to be looking for? And I say we as in the insurance industry. Why is this important? Well, guess what? If insurance thinks these controls are important, you should probably be paying attention to see if you have them in place as well, right? There's a lot of other things you can be doing to protect your business, but they're working their way down. Okay, so give insurance some time here, but this is basically where they're saying, look, folks, these are the table stakes. And if we want to be not only making you eligible for cyber insurance, but we don't want you paying the most for cyber insurance, we actually want to give you the best price. These are the things you need to be looking at first with working with folks like Bob at Simplex when it comes to understanding if you have these in place. So it's not just, the question is, okay, well, maybe there's 20 different things I could do. I could invest in for this problem, but where do I start? Well, work with people like Bob, but also understand there's other sources here that are saying the exact same thing. Look, here are the table stakes for protecting your business. Take it from the people that are putting their literal money where their mouth is. They don't want to lose money, the insurance industry.
And this is one of the ones where both the relationship with Simplex-IT from a how do we work on preventing it, but also then the relationship with someone like FifthWall can work with a how can we make sure to that there's a coverage in place that helps. You look at it from both perspectives, but we're both asking the same questions. And we're both looking for the same results.
Yeah.
So cool. Yeah.
All right, folks. We'll keep this short and sweet. It's really important not to lie in general. I tell my 7-year-old that. I tell my 4-year-old that regularly. But when it comes to filling out the applications and applying for insurance, this was a big deal. Travelers did this. Travelers, when any insurer rescinds a policy, it becomes big news, at least in my world. But I'm an insurance nerd. So, but it sets a precedent. And right now they're saying that they're coming back and they're showing us that, look, we want to make sure, because this was a company that they attested to having MFA in place. But after the breach occurred and forensics were done, the insurer was able to see, oh, wait a minute, this wasn't in fact the case, we wouldn't have actually even covered you if we actually knew the reality. And so that process is really important when you're going through it to understand, you conveying the right information. Wes, anything you want to add here real quick?
Well, money, yeah, money is not free, and the insurance companies are in it for profit. So they certainly, if you look at the loss ratios are like, how much did we pay out versus what we brought in, right? A good loss ratio, Reid, probably 10 to 15% for most like lines of coverage, like auto, things like that, right? Well, if you look over the past few years, loss ratios have been anywhere from 60% to 100+%. And so they have just really, really, really done a poor job. And so what you're seeing is sort of this reaction back from the carriers saying, wait, we're going to put our line in the sand here. And we're tired of misrepresentation. I'm sure this is not the first time it's happened, but it won't be the last either. And so this goes back to that last slide, those core control eligibility. We all remember, my kids are now all big enough now to where when we go to the theme park, we go to Busch Gardens a lot here in Tampa, they're all now tall enough to ride any ride they want to get into, right? But I remember that day when they'd go up to the little height post and they're in the yellow or the red and they couldn't ride it, and just that deep sadness. Don't be that. That's why Bob is here. What Bob is going to do is he's going to make sure you're eligible for the core controls. And it's not that difficult to get those things up and running, which is great. And even the cost of getting those up and running is worth every penny, because then you'll be in a boat to where you're not going to have insurance sort of rescind a policy back and come against you, right? Because you have the eligibility and the core controls in place. So I put a link, if you want to read more about it, link is in the LinkedIn chat. I didn't put it in the YouTube chat, but I'm sure we can get that over if anyone's on YouTube and wants a link into that to read more.
Yep, we can do that. And we actually did a video about this specific case earlier this year. So we'll get a link in there as well. So cool.
So yeah, some key takeaways. I'll go through a few of these things, right? So we've talked about it. The quantity, like the number of cyber attacks, is going up, up, up. The kinds of businesses that are being attacked is going down, down, down in terms of the business size. If you're small business, you're just as much of a target, if not a larger target. So we know that because of that happening, you've got to be prepared. You are, just hear me, you are a target. If you make money, you are a target. If you're a nonprofit, you have donor information, you are a target, right? Cyber insurance is the one thing that you can have in place that helps you with the damages of all of this, right? So it's really, really, really important. Just understand they're not all equal, right? At FifthWall, we work with 40+ carriers. So we work with them. We talk to them every single day. And so a lot of times you may find that you have a policy that you thought was great is not so good, or you have a policy that you're just very confused on, or you need to get a policy for the very first time. And it also may be that they're not equal in terms of year in, year out. Maybe you have a policy from carrier A this year, and then next year your premium price goes up triple. That happens a lot. And sometimes that happens because that carrier has experienced a lot of losses in your industry. And so we will sometimes see that and say, if we go to this other carrier, you're going to have what your rates are way cheaper, right? And so you've got to be very proactive on this. And that's why you need to be involved 2 to 3 months ahead of time, right? 60 to 90 days before that renewal comes. So take a look. If you don't even know when your renewal is, just get it over to Bob and we'll take a look at it with you. We always do free reviews. We will always do them. And so we'll take a look at it and let you know, hey, here's where, here's what we see on this. You want to be prepared for these things, because unfortunately what happens for me is I'll jump onto calls occasionally and someone's missing some things that they need to have in place and they weren't ready for it and they couldn't get in time. And I know we're about up to our minute to time. So those are the main things that I wanted to cover from some key takeaways.
The two things I want to add to this real quick, and then we'll get to the Q&A, are two things that Wes just said. And we don't want to have these webinars be advertisements, but these are two critical points. Number one, his point is they deal with 40 carriers. So this is not a company that is selling a product from a provider or vendor. They can take a look, they can review based on 40 different offerings for 40 different organizations alike, so that they can make sure, follow the industry trends, as well as take a look at your specific needs based on your industry, your size, your vulnerability, and the like. And the second is, this is what they do. So this is not where it's a general liability or a healthcare or whatever that is now decided, hey, cybersecurity sounds like fun. This is what they do, soup to nuts. So you're going to be dealing and conversing with the right folks. And then they deal with companies like Simplex-IT. so that we can partner together. We already speak the same language. And I want to be very clear. They ain't paying us any money. We ain't paying them any money. This is a relationship where we're both bringing value to our client base in the same way. So, cool. And that takes us to essentially where we are for Q&A. So, do we have any questions on either the YouTube or the LinkedIn side of things? And then we have one last offer. So while I'm waiting to hear anything, let me add, and this is kind of what both Wes and Reid were talking about earlier. And when we talk about special offer, these guys will actually do it under any circumstances. So as far as special offer goes, however, you work with us, go through us, we'll actually add some pieces, parts. We do have a question. So Brian, we're going to get to you in a second. We do add some additional security review stuff with you as well. But if you email me and we'll talk about that, we'll work with you on FifthWall as far as doing this. They'll do the side-by-side comparison. Do you guys want to add anything to that before we get to Brian's question?
No, I think just if there is no reason anyone shouldn't want to at least see what they have or don't have.
Absolutely.
Just to put it out there, because it is something you really want to make sure you have a good understanding on. This is a critical piece of protecting your business. And at the end of the day, what we may say is, guess what? You have a great policy. That's kind of the worst case scenario here.
Absolutely. And that's one of those where, because we have our reputation on the line as well, since we're working with FifthWall. So if FifthWall comes back and it turns out they're trying to upsell everybody, we're going to have a problem. They know that. They're smart enough, so it's not going to be an issue. Similarly, if they talk to our clients and say, well, Simplex-IT does a lousy job, we're in trouble. So it's on both of us to do a good job and provide good work. So Brian, you have a question of how do you validate MFA, et cetera. That's where monitoring your network. And there's two aspects of this question. One is, how do we do that from a day-to-day operational standpoint? And that is, you need to have the appropriate tools that can take a look at the configuration and the implementation of that configuration. So like, let's say, for example, in Microsoft 365, it's very easy, quote unquote, to look at the administrative site and to verify that they're all in place, they're all being done. Similarly, if you're using some third-party tools on your network, such as Duo or the like, it's fairly easy or straightforward to make sure that's implemented. The second question would be, how would a carrier, in the case of when something went bad, like the incident you guys were talking about earlier, how would the carrier approach making sure that the client had their stuff implemented? I'm going to leave that up to you guys to answer that.
Yeah, and I think if Brian, you were asking the question from the insurance perspective, there's kind of two areas that could be validated, and one exists, one doesn't. So in the traveler's instance, it's validated after something bad happens and they go in and they look under the hood, because they're going to have forensics done and they're going to go, wait a minute, these don't match up to what you said in the application. If we're talking about validating that you attested that you had MFA in place. Now, okay, got it. So I'm on the right. Thank you, Brian. I'm on the right track here. So here's the crazy thing. How do we know ahead of time? Now, insurance is still learning. So this is evolving. But right now, they're going through a process of changing their applications. Insurance has always been, hey, fill out this app, right? Fill out this application. We're going to ask you all the questions that we need to ask to understand where you are in risk tolerance, and then we'll apply a price to it, or not provide you a policy at all. Maybe you're in too bad a shape. After that, so they're going to ask questions around MFA, and each carrier is a little bit different right now on what they're asking about those specifics of MFA. Don't get Wes triggered on this, because some are just terrible at asking these questions. They're phrased very awkwardly. But then after the fact, they're assuming it's kind of that you indicated truthfully that those are the correct answers. Now, there is now an evolution right now that the insurance world is now moving into with trying to get real-time validation. So let's not be surprised, because kind of the once a year attestation has created a lot of problems for the industry. So, but for right now, Brian, after you fill out that application, there is no validation. But let's not be surprised if shortly we'll see changes to that.
And that actually, and I brought back the slide that talked about the crisis management services that shows the forensics. And this almost flips it from a we're working together, we're partners, all that kind of fun stuff, it almost turns into an adversarial situation because you didn't do what you said you were doing. And we don't need that to be added to all the pain and hurt that we're going through at that moment.
You nailed it.
Yep.
Completely agree.
Good question. Any others? While you have some cyber insurance nerds, which I assume is not a common thing for most of the folks on today. I know we're not that popular of a group, but come on.
Cool. So let me ask this question. How would you, so organizations, you're basically saying that they should be taking a look about 3 months prior to their renewal dates at the very least, or sooner or the like. How often do you see that it is appropriate for an organization to change their carrier? I mean, the first time, absolutely, I could see that because it turned out they weren't getting something that was appropriate aligned for them. Are you seeing a lot of shifting though from carriers from one year to another once people are actually treating it seriously?
Depends on the carrier they were with, Bob, to be honest. So some have, when I say some carriers, so some carriers have maintained somewhat of a steady stance on industries that they're insuring, right? But then if you may be with another carrier, I mean, we'll see, I'm not going to name names, but that was carrier A. Carrier B over here, however, last year was really rough for them in manufacturing.
Right.
So this year, the rates went up triple. Yeah, we're going to be moving a lot. So yeah, the time, I mean, Wes was spot on. I mean, there's a lot of really good products out there. When I say products, I mean policies. But you got to understand the markets that they're being provided by and where they are in their risk tolerance, right? Is it, if you're a professional services, are you better with this carrier or this carrier? And for what reason? So the volatility has kind of created a little bit of musical chairs because some are better some years than others. And it's going to be that way for some time because everyone's still kind of getting solid footing. It's still wet sand right now. Folks are kind of still figuring it out.
Yep. The only other thing I would add to that too, and you hinted at it, Reid, is in industries, right? There are just certain high risk industries for carriers. And you mentioned like education is one, healthcare is one, manufacturing is one, anything like state, local government is one. So, and there are a few others. So if you find yourself in a high risk industry that just has a history of a lot of breaches and breach payouts, that's where you're really going to need to shop the market for sure, because you're going to see, carrier A, 6X on your last policy, but we found carrier D that was only double the cost from last year to this, right? So you really got to shop the field if you're in a high risk industry.
Cool. Okay. And I'm not seeing any other questions. The one last comment I want to do is that our next webinar is going to be on Tuesday, November 29th. We're actually going to be working with some folks from KeyBank and from Pax8, one of our favorite vendors, talking about the 12 cyber crimes of Christmas.
Good.
Well, it's because it's approaching year end. It's approaching the holidays. And with everything else going on, the bad guys know this is a time to really double down on their efforts. And we're going to talk about both some of the technical and the non-technical ways that they're going to be attacking all of us for that time. So that should be good. Wes, Reid, this actually seemed to technically work. I'm as surprised as you guys are. I still think AOL would have been a better way to go, but what can I say? So, but thank you very, very much for joining us on this.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, Bob.
Thanks to everybody else. And with that, take care.